The cold Atlantic wind howled across the jagged rocks as a solitary figure broke stone under a blinding sun. Year after year, the white limestone dust coated his skin and burned his eyes. Chains of routine bound him tighter than any metal. The same tiny cell, the same back-breaking labor, the same dehumanizing numbers shouted by guards. Prisoner 46,664. Yet inside that unbreakable will, a different fire burned, one not fueled by rage, but by a vision of a nation reborn. How does a man endure nearly 3 decades of deliberate cruelty and emerge not seeking vengeance, but offering his hand in reconciliation? This is the epic journey of Nelson Mandela, a story that reshaped a country and challenged the world to imagine a better way. In the rolling hills of South Africa's Eastern Cape, where ancient rhythms of the Thembu people echoed through the valleys, a child entered the world on July 18, 1918. The village of Mvezo was small, its home simple, its community bound by traditions that had survived generations of challenge. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakaniiswa, carried the responsibilities of chieftainship with quiet authority. His mother, Nosekini Fanny, nurtured him amid the warmth of a large family. They called him Rililala, a name meaning troublemaker, in Xhosa, a playful prophecy that would one day shake the foundations of an unjust system. Tragedy came swiftly. At just 9 years old, Rililala lost his father. The regent Janjan Taba Dalandibo stepped in, raising the boy as his own at the Great Place, a center of Themba leadership. There, beneath wide African skies, the young boy absorbed lessons that would anchor his entire life. He witnessed councils where chiefs gathered in circles, where every speaker, regardless of status, had their say. The leader never rushed to judgment, but listened deeply, synthesizing voices before offering wisdom. In those gatherings, Rililala learned that real power did not shout, it understood. It did not dominate, it united. Formal education opened new doors and new conflicts. Missionary schools introduced him to English ways, and a teacher bestowed the name Nelson. He thrived at boarding institutions like Clarkberry and Heldtown, his mind sharp and curious. Then came the University of Fort Hare, a beacon for black students in a land of limited horizons. The campus hummed with intellectual energy, a place where future leaders dreamed of change. But Nelson's sense of justice already ran deep. Elected to the Student Representative Council, he protested what he viewed as an undemocratic process and refused the position. The university demanded obedience. He chose expulsion instead. At 22, he had tasted the cost of conviction, a pattern that would define decades ahead. The move to Johannesburg felt like stepping into a whirlwind. The city pulsed with energy, minds extracting wealth, streets alive with ambition, yet divided by invisible and very real barriers of race. For a young black man, opportunities were shadowed by laws designed to confine. Nelson secured work in a law office, studying at night under flickering lamps. He qualified as an attorney and, alongside his trusted friend Oliver Tambo, established the first black law practice in the country. Their modest office became a sanctuary for the oppressed. Clients poured in with heart-wrenching accounts. Fathers hauled away for missing passbooks. Families evicted from homes declared whites only. Lives upended by bureaucratic cruelty. Each story deepened Nelson's resolve. The air in South Africa grew heavier in the 1940s as racial restrictions tightened like a noose. Then, in 1948, the system received its formal, brutal name, Apartheid. Separateness. A policy that classified every citizen by skin color and dictated their destiny. White minority rule controlled land, politics, education, and opportunity. The black majority, people whose ancestors had lived on this soil for centuries, found themselves strangers in their homeland. They could not vote, could not choose neighborhoods, could not access equal services or dignity. Nelson Mandela stood at the crossroads of conscience. The democratic ideals he had witnessed in Thembu councils clashed violently with this engineered division. Apartheid did not merely separate, it dehumanized. It whispered that some lives mattered less. Nelson knew, with every fiber of his being, that this was a lie that demanded confrontation. He immersed himself in the African National Congress, rising as a dynamic organizer and speaker. His energy was magnetic, tall, articulate, fearless. He crisscrossed the country, rallying communities, coordinating strikes, boycotts, and marches. The ANC pursued peaceful resistance at first, petitions, demonstrations, calls for justice. Nelson's leadership shone through his ability to inspire without inflaming unnecessarily. But the state responded with bans, arrests, and violence. Police dispersed crowds with batons. Laws restricted his movements. Friends and comrades faced harassment. The pressure tested everyone involved, yet Nelson's commitment only hardened. By the early 1960s, the path of nonviolence faced a devastating wall. The Sharpeville massacre in 1960, where peaceful protesters were gunned down, sent shockwaves across the globe. Blood stained the soil, and the government doubled down. In this atmosphere of escalating brutality, Nelson faced one of his most wrenching decisions. Alongside others, he helped establish Umkhonto we Sizwe, the spear of the nation, the armed wing of the ANC. Their campaign targeted infrastructure, power lines, empty government buildings, aimed at sabotage that would pressure the regime without indiscriminate loss of life. It was a shift born of desperation, a recognition that words alone were being ignored. The authorities labeled him a terrorist. The hunt intensified. Underground existence became a tense game of shadows. Safe houses, disguises, narrow escapes. Nelson lived on the run, knowing each day could bring capture. In 1962, it did. Arrested and later tried in the landmark Rivonia Trial, he and his co-accused stared down the possibility of execution. The world watched as the courtroom in Pretoria became a theater of moral courage. Standing tall before the judge, Nelson delivered a statement that would resonate through history. He spoke of his lifelong dream, a democratic South Africa where all could live in harmony, with equal chances. He affirmed his readiness to die for that vision if necessary. The words hung in the air, powerful and unflinching. The sentence came, life imprisonment instead of death. A small mercy in a system built on control. Robben Island loomed in the distance, a barren outcrop surrounded by treacherous waters. Transferred there, Nelson entered a world engineered to break men. His cell was minuscule, barely enough room to move. A thin mat on the floor, a bucket, a high slit for a window that offered only a tease of sky. Days blurred into years of quarry labor, hammers striking limestone that filled the air with choking dust. His eyesight suffered permanent damage from the glare. Guards addressed him only by number, 46664. Visits were severely limited. Letters censored. The isolation was profound, designed to erode identity and hope. Yet Nelson Mandela transformed the prison into a place of unexpected growth. He studied relentlessly, earning a law degree through correspondence. He engaged fellow inmates in discussions, learning languages including Afrikaans to comprehend the worldview of his captors. To defeat an enemy, understand him, became a guiding principle. He petitioned persistently for a small garden plot and, against odds, received it. Tending tomatoes, onions, and peppers became a ritual of quiet defiance, nurturing life where death was expected. Green shoots pushing through harsh earth mirrored his own unyielding spirit. Over time, even some guards recognized the dignity in this man who refused to be diminished. He treated everyone with respect, modeling the humanity the system denied. The years stretched, 10, 15, 20. Outside the island walls, South Africa boiled with unrest. The 1976 Soweto uprising saw students rise against forced Afrikaans education, only to face lethal force from authorities. Images of fallen youth horrified the globe. International sanctions isolated the regime. Free Mandela banners waved in cities worldwide. His name became synonymous with the anti-apartheid struggle, a beacon for those fighting oppression everywhere. Though isolated, Nelson remained connected in spirit, his steadfastness inspiring millions. Transfers to mainland prisons like Pollsmoor and later Victor Verster signaled shifting tides. Secret negotiations began as apartheid's edifice cracked. The government sought a controlled exit. Nelson held firm for genuine democracy. The breaking point tested everything he believed. After 27 long years, missing his children's growth, funerals of loved ones, the simple freedoms of daily life, he refused bitterness. As he later reflected, leaving hatred behind was essential to true freedom. On February 11, 1990, the gates opened. Nelson Mandela walked out into sunlight, hand in hand with his wife Winnie, greeted by a jubilant nation and a watching world. At 71, his hair gray but his posture resolute, he called not for retribution, but for peace and unity. The road ahead was arduous. Negotiations with President F.W. de Klerk demanded patience, compromise, and courage. They argued, clashed, yet persisted. In 1993, the two men shared the Nobel Peace Prize for steering the country away from catastrophe. Then came 1994, the first democratic election in South Africa's history. Voters of every background queued for hours, some waiting an entire day under the sun. Elderly citizens who had never before cast a ballot wept with emotion. Nelson voted for the first time at 75. The ANC's victory swept him into the presidency. On May 10, 1994, during his inauguration, he made a gesture that stunned observers, inviting his former Robben Island guards to sit prominently as honored guests. The prisoner now led the nation, extending grace to those who had guarded his cell. As president, Nelson focused on reconciliation, nation-building, and healing deep wounds. He served a single term, stepping aside in 1999 to strengthen democratic norms. In later years, he championed education, health initiatives, and global peace efforts. His passing on December 5, 2013, at age 95, united the world in mourning. Leaders from across continents gathered. Candles flickered in streets from Johannesburg to New York. Flags flew at half-mast. But his influence endured far beyond any ceremony. Nelson Mandela's life stands as a testament to the power of principled resilience. From the boy in Mvezo who learned leadership through listening, to the lawyer fighting injustice, the activist risking everything, the prisoner forging strength in solitude, and the president guiding a fragile transition, he embodied the belief that dignity belongs to all. He showed that forgiveness is not forgetting or weakness, but the hardest, most liberating choice. It frees the spirit from chains no prison can impose. In tending his prison garden, he cultivated hope. In negotiating with former adversaries, he planted seeds of a shared future. In leaving office voluntarily, he nurtured democracy's roots. His legacy challenges every generation. In a world still grappling with division, inequality, and conflict, Mandela reminds us that moral clarity and empathy can move mountains. He proved that one person's unshakable commitment to justice and humanity can ripple outward, transforming societies. The stone walls of Robben Island could not contain his vision. The years stolen from him did not diminish his capacity for grace. As we reflect on this extraordinary journey, consider the quiet courage required to endure without breaking, to emerge ready to build rather than destroy. Nelson Mandela's story is not just history, it is an enduring invitation. What would you choose if faced with profound injustice? How can we apply even a fraction of his wisdom in our own lives and communities? Share your thoughts below. Which part of his journey resonates most deeply with you? The early sacrifices, the years of isolation, or the triumphant grace of leadership? Your reflections keep this legacy alive. Stories like this remind us that even in the darkest cells, the human spirit can rise, plant seeds, and one day walk free into a brighter dawn.